The Senate will come to order. I ask everyone present to please rise and repeat with me the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. In the absence of clergy, let us bow our heads in a moment of silent reflection or prayer. Reading of the Journal.
In Senate, Tuesday, March 31st, 2020, the Senate met pursuant to adjournment. The Journal of Monday, March 30th, 2020 was read and approved. On motion, Senate adjourned.
Without objection, the Journal stands approved as read. Presentation of petitions, messages from the Assembly, messages from the Governor, reports of standing committees, reports of select committees, communications and reports from state officers, motions and resolutions. Senator Janaris.
Mr. President, there will be an immediate meeting of the Finance Committee in room 332.
There will be an immediate meeting of the Finance Committee in room 332.
The Senate will stand at ease.
The Senate will stand at ease. The Senate will return to order. Senator Janaris.
Is there a report of the Finance Committee at the desk?
There is a report of the Finance Committee at the desk. The Secretary will read.
Senator Krueger from the Committee on Finance reports the following bill. Senate Print 7503C, Senate Budget Bill, an act making appropriations for the support of government aid to localities budget.
Finance Committee report.
All in favor of accepting the Committee on Finance signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The Committee on Finance is accepted, report is accepted and before the House.
Can we now take up the supplemental calendar, please?
The Secretary will read.
Calendar number 634, Senate Print 7503C, Senate Budget Bill, an act making appropriation for the support of local government aid to localities budget.
Senator Janaris.
Message of necessity at the desk.
There is a message of necessity at
Move
the
to
desk.
accept the message of necessity.
All in favor of accepting the message of necessity signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The message is accepted and the bill is before the House.
Lay it aside.
Lay it aside. Senator Janaris, that completes the reading of today's supplemental calendar.
Please take up the controversial calendar.
The Secretary will ring the bell. The Secretary will read.
Calendar number 634, Senate Budget Bill, Senate Print 7503C, an act making appropriation for the support of government aid to localities budget.
Senator Griffo.
Thank you, Mr. President. Would Senator Krueger yield?
Yes, I will.
Thank you, Senator Krueger. Mr. President, through you, we know these are extremely challenging times, and many people are facing many difficult decisions and situations, and we appreciate the work that everyone is trying to do here. So the question that I have, though, Senator Krueger, is I know you were negotiating this, and there will be significant economic concerns and considerations as we move forward. But there was particularly what the interest that we would like to have just a little more elaboration on is relative to the roles and powers of the Division of Budget that were negotiated and how that will now play as a result of what we incorporate during the budget process here and then moving forward for any other decisions that would be made in fiscal year 2021 relative to executive prerogative and power that is different from what already exists.
Thank you, Mr. Griffo? Senator Griffo, excuse me. Well, you're a Mr. also. It's an excellent question, and it's not one answer. There are a number of different sections in budget bills that will be moving before the House today, hopefully just today it will be done, that do change temporarily a number of different powers of the governor in relationship to the budget. I will just start out, and then you're welcome to dig down further if you like. Because of the uncertainties caused by COVID-19 pandemic, are expected to result in significant adjustments in state revenues and expenditures. There are a number of places in the budget where we provide for the possibility of resultant gaps, which will need to be addressed during the course of the year, both increased costs to the state of New York and also the possibility of increased federal revenue assistance. allowing us to potentially not have to draw down as much on reserve funds or the deferrals of non-essential state operations and local assistance payments that we're actually cutting in budget bills like today's bill. And so, to the extent necessary, we have tried to assure that the governor has the ability to rapidly make adjustments to this year's budget for management authority to allow him to either accept federal money that we don't know whether exists or doesn't exist now, and also, unfortunately, to move around or reduce money as we see revenues continue to plummet.
Mr. President, if Senator Krueger would continue to yield.
Yes, certainly.
Sponsor yields.
Through you, Mr. President. Senator Krueger, understandable, as you outlined. One of the questions would be relative to any adjustments, because in recognition that we are co-equal branches of government and have a role and responsibility, will there be additional oversight for the legislature if we feel that any action being taken by the executive is contrary to the goal and mission as directed through the budget process in the legislature?
Through you, Mr. President, while there are within different budget bills and even within different programs within different budget bills, different answers to that question. In some cases, it requires going back to the legislature, getting consent or agreement from the two leaders of the Assembly and the Senate. In some cases, simply reporting to the Senate and the Assembly. In other cases, on a, I think, quarterly basis. Yes, I believe quarterly basis. Even under these conditions, I have to communicate with staff across the room as opposed to sitting in the chair. And there are a number of examples wherein, again, the ability of the governor to make the decision absent the legislature's participation is only within this calendar, this state fiscal year.
Mr. President, through you, Senator, continue to yield.
Does the sponsor yield?
Yes, I will.
The sponsor
Mr.
yields.
President, through you. So Senator Krueger, then, it is, we know for definitively then this would only apply for this particular fiscal year, 2021, and in no way would those powers in any way, as we know, we've seen several court cases and other actions, and the executive is in a very strong position in the budget process. We don't believe any precedent will be established here that could be detrimental to the deliberations and the responsibilities of the legislature.
Thinking. Does anything go beyond? Would Senator Griffin mind if I actually allowed the answer to come? But because I don't want him to have to get so close to me to whisper?
That's fine.
Thank you.
Thank you, Senators. Thank you. Thank you. Senator, the provision that Senator Krueger was speaking about in terms of the ability to make mid-year adjustments to the appropriations and the spending plan, those are consistent with authorization that has been granted previously, where the power applies to the 1 year of the appropriations. There is a one change that in previous years the authority has been pursuant to a plan developed by the
Senator Janaris.
Yeah, just by way of protocol, the rules of the Senate don't allow non-senators to engage in debate. So what I would ask is feel free to speak loudly enough to the staff so that Senator Krueger can hear the commentary of the staff and then she can answer the question.
I apologize. I broke the rules. Everything is on a one-year basis for changing appropriations, which is consistent with actions that have taken place in the past, I believe also when we're in emergency situations.
If Mr. President, Senator would continue to yield.
Does the sponsor yield?
Absolutely.
Sponsor yields.
Mr. President, through you, Thank you, Senator Kruger, and these are truly unimaginable times and unorthodox, so I think everybody would understand, and we appreciate the work of all of our staffs and the important role that they all play. And we do respect Senator Kruger's knowledge and finance field. She's done this for a long time. So the last thing I would just ask then is, we talked about there could be potentially draconian cuts as a result of what no one can forecast what will happen and how it will happen, unfortunately. But there is the possibility, we've seen one federal stimulus recovery package, and it's my hope and I believe that we will see others that will hopefully continue to deal with the needs of the individual as well as the businesses and also the governments that have been affected, because the taxpayers are part of the government and they support the government. So that has to be hopefully something that will be considered. So if there was additional revenue and that came in, and how would we then have a role to ensure that it's being directed to where it may be most needed, particularly, say, in education and fields like that, so it's not within the purview of the executive to just determine this is where I would rather put it as opposed to that?
So, I'd like to, Mr. President, through you, I'd like to point out, I like Senator Griffo and perhaps like the other 62 senators. If we look at this budget, if we look at the cuts that are being made, I think it breaks our heart. There are programs that we know we are cutting that are desperately needed in our communities. There's not one of us who will go unscathed. There's not one New Yorker who will go unscathed. And so these decisions to cut are extremely personal and difficult for us. We believe that under the circumstances, we have set up a model that will allow, if and when additional federal money comes in, and we technically have had 3 bills pass Congress already to offer us support and funding, but it is way inadequate, and we need to all lobby everyone in Washington to hear us. We need more money in New York now, but we have set up the budget such that if and when supplemental monies came from the federal government, it would be directed to refill the priorities that were in the budget before we had to make these draconian cuts. So yes, I believe that it is the intention of the way we've written the bills, and in understanding with the governor's office that if and when there is federal money that can help us refill the holes we are being forced to create, that those will be priorities, of course, after the priorities of public health and responding to the COVID situation. Because I don't think any of us yet, and I come from Manhattan, ground zero, I don't think any of us yet understand what the ramifications will be in total to the state of New York before this disease comes and goes.
Thank you, Senator Kruger, and thank you, Mr. President. Senator Ort, please.
Senator Ort.
Yes, thank you, Mr. President. On the bill.
Senator Ort on the bill.
I just want to, this has got to be the strangest circumstance for us to be here today. I think everyone would agree. And I even went through my own mind about whether I was going to speak on this bill, because obviously here we are in an empty chamber by and large. But I do think we are still here doing arguably the most important thing that we do in any given session, which is to pass a budget over $170 billion, even with cuts and even with holding spending in line, that affects every New Yorker in some way. And so it is still incumbent upon all of us, and I think certainly those of us in the minority, to speak on what is going on and what's happening. Because the truth is, a lot of folks right now are glued to their television watching coverage about coronavirus. And maybe they're worried, they're watching news because maybe their wife is a healthcare worker. Maybe their husband is a healthcare worker. Maybe their wife or husband is a first responder. Maybe their wife or husband is in the Army National Guard, like I once was, and they're on the front lines of this pandemic, and they're not sure what's going to happen. Maybe they're watching because their business has been shuttered. And doing this under these circumstances is not easy, but that's all the more important that we get it right. This might be the most important budget that we pass because we're doing it at this exact moment in time. And whether you have a ton of money, whether you have no money, I certainly have advocated for reducing the amount we spend here in New York for my entire time I've been in the state legislature. So far be it from me today to criticize the fact that we need to reduce our spending. And under this circumstance, we certainly do. But it's still an old adage that show me your budget and I'll show you your priorities. It's where you're making the cuts. So we're not asking Hollywood film studios to go without. We're not asking the governor to go without a lot of the money he still puts in his economic development programs. But we are asking, whether it's schools or in the case that I want to point out today, mental health. So at a time when people are alone, when they're isolated, we're reducing. We eliminated FarmNet. FarmNet is out. For those that don't know, this was a mental health program geared specifically towards farmers. So less than a year after we passed a significant piece of legislation that will have a negative impact on the bottom line of farmers across New York, and at a time when we are losing 1/3 of our farms over the past several years, we are reducing a program that went to help with their mental health. And of course, many of these farmers live in rural communities where there is already a lack or dearth of mental health services. We've also reduced mental health program called Dwyer, which is mental health service to our veterans, by 50%. So veterans and farmers, they're going to go without. They're going to see less when it comes to their mental health, and these were two programs that worked. And by the way, it was a de minimis amount of money in the context of a $170 billion budget. We're talking about, I think between the two of them, maybe $2.5 million total. We lose $2.5 million in this chamber and wouldn't even know it some years. And so I find it quite objectionable that we're asking these folks, some of our most vulnerable, to, in some cases, go without. And I also want to comment on the authority that we're passing to the governor, as specifically as it relates, maybe generally, but as it relates to, in this bill, our CHIPS and winter recovery and infrastructure money to our localities. So we're not making a cut in this budget. We're restoring the funding. It's all there on paper. But, this is a big but, we're passing off what is really our responsibility to the governor. We're passing it off to the governor, and we're saying you can cut at a later date. You can make reductions at a later date in time. And the reason we're doing that is because, in my opinion, we just simply don't have the political will to make these hard decisions today. We know that we're looking at anywhere from $10 to $15 billion deficit. It could be worse. We know we're going to have to make tough decisions. I think it is disingenuous, first of all, for us to pretend that the money's there and then punt the hard decision to the executive or to the division of budget. But I also think, and I've said this for years, whether my party was in the majority or today, I think it is very dangerous for this body to cede more authority to the executive, particularly as it relates to appropriations. The biggest thing that we have, the biggest check we have on the executive, any legislature has on the executive, is the control of taxpayer dollars. And if we cede that authority to the executive, even a little bit, or even a little bit more, I think it is to our detriment, I think it is to the state's detriment, and I think it's an abdication of our responsibility that we were elected to come do. Yes, these are tough decisions. Yes, Senator Krueger's right. Nobody wants to make these cuts. That's why they're never made. That's why we never make them, because everyone has, well, don't make the cut there, don't make the cut over here, but at the end of the day, we do have to make them. and then we have to go out and explain to voters why they were made. But we're not really doing that. We're saying, Governor, you make the hard decisions throughout the year. And so, for those reasons, Mr. President, I will be reported in the negative.
Senator Krueger,
Thank you.
on the bill?
Yes, on the
Senator
bill.
Krueger on the bill.
I so appreciate my colleagues' statements. I just wanted to clarify for the record that we agree with you. And so we took those sections out of this bill and put them in a bill coming up. And I just want to assure you that we've actually increased funding for the Dwyer program and expanded it to several additional counties. And we've also restored the FarmNet mental health program because, as I said before, I think many of us on both sides of the aisle have exactly the same feelings about the problems we're facing and the priorities. And I just wanted to assure you personally that that's not a bill that has yet come before the floor, but those two programs are not taking cuts, and Dwyer is actually increasing. That's okay. I just wanted to make sure it was said for you and on the record. Thank you, Mr. President.
I rise to a point of information. Senator Ort was not briefed improperly. Unfortunately, we didn't get a full briefing because the bills were working together in order to receive bills, then review the bills, and then brief the members. And obviously, we didn't have that information yet, so that's what it was based upon. So we respect that. Just wanted to make it for, and I think my colleague. All right, thank you.
It's closed. The secretary will ring the bell. Read the last section.
Section 2, this act shall take effect immediately.
Call the roll.
Adabo, Fanian, Janoris, Kruger, Stewart, Cousins, Thomas.
Announce the results.
In relation to calendar 634, those senators voted in the negative are Senators Akshar, Amador, Borrello, Boyle, Flanagan, Funky, Gallivan, Griffo, Helming, Jacobs, Jordan, Lanza, Laval, Little, O'Mara, Ort, Ranzenhofer, Ritchie, Robach, Sereno, and Tedisco. Ayes 40, nays 21.
The bill is passed. Senator Janoris, that completes the reading of the controversial calendar.
Mr. President, by way of procedure, if I could just tell folks what to expect today, let me reiterate what Senator Griffo said. We are working with our colleagues to give them information in bill language as soon as we have it, and sometimes when issues are disconnected from bills they might normally be in, there might be some information that comes later, so that will be briefed in an appropriate time, but it certainly wasn't any fault of the minority who is getting the information we give them. We do anticipate passing the handful of budget bills remaining over the course of today. As we get the language, we want to give our colleagues time to digest it, review it, and ask questions and be briefed on it. So we will currently stand at ease while we wait for the next bill to arrive, but we will be taking them up as soon as they become available.
The Senate will stand at ease. The Senate will return to order. Senator Janoris.
There will be an immediate meeting of the Finance Committee in room 332.
There will be an immediate meeting of the Finance Committee in room 332.
The Senate will stand at ease.
The Senate will stand at ease. The Senate will return to order. Senator Janoris.
President, is there a report of the Finance Committee at the desk?
There's a report of the Finance Committee at the desk. The Secretary will read.
Senator Krueger from the Committee on Finance supports the following bill. Senate Print 7508B, Senate Budget Bill, an act to amend the highway law and the transportation law.
Senator Janoris.
Move to accept the Finance Committee report.
All in favor of accepting the Committee on Finance report signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The Committee on Finance report is accepted and before the House.
May we take up the supplemental calendar, please?
The Secretary will read.
Calendar number 635, Senate Print 7508B, Senate Budget Bill, an act to amend the highway law and the transportation law.
Senator Janaris.
Is there a message of necessity at the desk?
There is a message of necessity
Move to
at the desk.
Move to accept the message of necessity.
All in favor of accepting the message of necessity signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The message is accepted and the bill is before the House. Lay it aside. Lay it aside. Senator Janaris, that completes the reading of today's supplemental calendar.
And we now move on to the reading of the controversial calendar, please.
The Secretary will ring the bell. The Secretary will read.
Calendar number 635, Senate Print 7508B, Senate Budget Bill, an act to amend the highway law and the transportation law.
Senator Griffo.
President, would you recognize Senator Amador, please?
Senator Amador.
Thank you, Mr. President. Will the sponsor yield for a few questions on this bill?
Does the sponsor yield?
Yes, Mr.
The
President.
sponsor yields.
Well, thank you, Senator Savino, for answering a couple questions. We want to talk about particularly the section of the TED Part FFF, requiring prevailing wage to be paid on certain private construction projects. Could you explain what this really does and is all about?
Gladly, Senator Amador. So as you know, almost 100 years ago, in fact, probably the last constitutional convention that this state held, the public spoke very loudly and clearly about the definition of prevailing wage in public works and how public dollars should not chase poverty wages. That if we were going to use public dollars for private construction projects, that those private construction projects receiving those public dollars would pay the prevailing wage in that region to create good paying jobs. In fact, it was one of the reasons why we were able to get out of the Depression in 1934. It was thinking like that that allowed us to create good solid wages for working men and women across this state. Somewhat ironic that we're doing it right now as we're in the cusp of what most people think is the next Great Recession.
Through you, Mr. President, will the sponsor continue to yield?
Yes, Mr. President.
Sponsor yields.
Senator Savino, you mentioned about a public dollar or an investment made by public taxpayers into a construction project. Would a private construction project that receives no public dollar but may receive a tax abatement that the developer or builder over time will pay its full assessment share of what the new tax bill would be and liability would be, would that qualify for this under this provision?
Through you, Mr. President, yes, it could qualify, and it might be dependent upon the total tax savings achieved during the course of the project.
What are the thresholds in this bill? Through you, Mr. President, I'm sorry.
Does the sponsor yield?
Yes.
The sponsor yields.
I believe the question was, what are the thresholds? So through you, Mr. President, the thresholds for the definition of this prevailing wage bill says that if public money goes to a private project, the minimum cost must be $5 million, and 30% of the money that's received from public dollars is in that project. So $5 million threshold, 30% of the total dollars are public dollars.
Through you, Mr. President, will the sponsor continue to yield?
Does the sponsor yield?
Yes, Mr.
Sponsor
President.
yields.
So if a developer or contractor never receives public dollar, but again receives some type of pilot program that's approved by the local county government or agency, an IDA, for instance, no exchange, no public dollar being exchanged to build the project, but just a tax abatement or a sales tax abatement, would that still require prevailing wage on a private construction job that is $5 million of value or over?
Good, because tax incentives, tax abatements, and tax credits are all public dollars.
Through you, Mr. President, the sponsor continue to
Does the
yield?
sponsor yield?
Yes, Mr.
Sponsor
President.
yields.
Yeah, we may fundamentally disagree on that because there's no dollar being change of hands. No check is written by the state to the developer to build a project. But the question that I have for you is, can you explain this creation of the Public Subsidy Review Board?
The question.
Can you explain the creation of this Public Subsidy Review Board that is mentioned in this part of the bill?
So the Public Subsidy Review Board was a proposal from the governor's bill to answer some of the very questions that you are raising here today. So the Public Subsidy Review Board is going to consist of 13 individuals. 11 of them are gubernatorial appointments, 2 of them belong to the legislature, 4 of them will represent upstate, downstate business and labor entities. So that everybody has a seat at the table to answer some of these very questions. You could go to the Public Subsidy Board for approval on particular projects, for clarification. If you are turned down, it's subject to, let me put my glasses on to make sure I'm reading it correctly. Actions taken by the board will require public hearings or written testimony, notice of activity, and Article 78 legal reviews.
Mr. President, sponsor continue to yield.
Does the sponsor yield?
Yes, Mr. President.
Sponsor yields.
Senator Savino, if this bill was to pass and this policy becomes law in the state of New York, is this for a specific region of the state of New York, or is it for the entire state of New York as a whole?
Through you, Mr. President, is for the entire state of New York.
Through you, Mr. President, will the sponsor continue to yield?
Does the sponsor yield?
Yes, Mr. President.
Sponsor yields.
Under this provision, will the prevailing wage policy increase costs of construction that normally would not be if this doesn't happen?
Mr. President, yes, probably. In some instances, it will.
Will the sponsor continue to yield?
Does the sponsor yield?
Yes, Mr.
Sponsor
President.
yields.
Do you have any idea what the percentage of cost increase would be?
Mr. President, there are certain studies that could potentially point out the increased cost of construction, but at the end of the day, you actually achieve a savings because you get better quality work, higher safety standards on these jobs, and most importantly, those public dollars that are going to private developers are then being funneled through to citizens of the state of New York, and they're going to spend that money in their own communities. They're going to be able to raise their families. They're going to be able to put food on the table. They will have decency and dignity in their work. And after all, isn't that what public dollars should support?
Mr. President, on the bill.
Senator Amador on the bill.
I first want to thank Senator Savino for answering some of the questions that I had, and I know the hours continue starting to get late in the day, and there's much more work to be done on the budget. Well, we all know that this is very peculiar times. We've never been in this situation before in our lifetime, in this state or in this country. So we're really all rookies at this because the last real big pandemic that we really faced, like we see today, was probably back in 1918. And in times of uncertainty, economic uncertainty, we know the governor has said himself, the President of the United States has said himself, the economy is not working right now. The economy is basically shut off. New Yorkers are fearful. New Yorkers are hurting. New Yorkers are out of jobs. New Yorkers are not spending money. They're forced to stay home. There's non-essential businesses that are not working, that are closed, they're closed shops. New Yorkers right now need all the help they can get. And I understand the importance of good quality labor on construction, the ability to perform and to have job safety conditions, site safety conditions that have nothing to do with the wage of a construction job. It has everything to do with the management of the construction job, as well as all of the authoritative boards and agencies on the federal and state that promulgate the rules of safety. I also understand that we all in this chamber represent our constituents who have been calling since the beginning of March of this year, when they had heard the news that either they've been laid off and they can't get through the unemployment agencies or office to get their benefit, to get their paycheck, or how they're going to pay their mortgage, or how they're going to pay their rent, how they're going to pay their utility. We have constituents who say, we need affordability. How can I afford to live in the state of New York? This particular section of this budget bill adds to the cost once again, adds to the burden of all New Yorkers once again by the state government and by the governor of the state of New York. By increasing the cost of construction, whether it's a public job or whether it is a private job. As my friend Senator Savino mentioned, possibly, could be, maybe a range of a percentage of increase of construction, 15, 20, 30% to the cost of construction, to their project. I think about even the MTA, and I don't represent New York City. But I have a daughter who lives there who uses this system. The cost that it's going to increase because of the prevailing wage measures. Schools, fire departments, I know they pay prevailing wage now, but now we're talking about private jobs. And those small contractors who either have not been on a prevailing wage job or don't have the means to be on a prevailing wage job, or a developer who can't afford to pay a prevailing wage job, I think about the pass-through cost to the consumer, whether it is renting an apartment, whether it is maybe even buying a home or a condominium or however it may be, or whether it is now going to a department store or any type of development that would be through an IDA program. The consumer will pay more. Not just the developer, not just the contractor, general contractor. The consumer, the residents of the state of New York will pay more. And it's just not about a 15 or 25%. I asked if this is a regional approach or if this was going to affect regionally. Maybe just be in New York City. New York City numbers and wage rates are far higher than they are right here in the capital region, the Hudson Valley, the Mohawk Valley region that I represent, or even parts of Western New York or the North Country of New York. I can't imagine in a time when we have the economic uncertainty, the significance of this pandemic that is wreaking havoc in the state of New York right now, that this particular part of this bill, with a whole host of other, I think, bad policies and increases to the New York state residents, is the focal point and is a necessity. This has nothing to do with even helping out those families struggling for life right now with the COVID-19 epidemic. Nothing. This is not going to create more jobs, nor will it even help construction workers, because developers in the private sector will not continue to invest. Why do they go and ask for maybe a pilot program through their local IDAs? Is because the burden of doing business, the cost of doing business, the taxes are too high in the state of New York. And they need to amortize the project cost over time in order to make it successful. So I think, Mr. President, this particular part of this bill, along with others, comes at the wrong time and gets shoved into a budget bill that's got many parts and facets to it, that should be a bill on its own, that we can have proper debate, proper insight. And I know this is something that many of the advocates have been working on for many years in the state of New York. But now also to develop or to establish a public subsidy review board that is appointed by the governor, the leader of the Senate, the leader of the Assembly. Who are these people? How is it going to be? How is it going to run? It brings more uncertainty to the private sector, who is the backbone to get our economy up and running again. All those small businesses that had the opportunity to invest in construction projects may not now because of this particular burden and another layer of bureaucracy that is going to be added through the approval process just to try to get their project to market. So for those reasons and many others, I will be voting in the negative. Thank you.
Senator Jacobs.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, from the first day...
Senator, are
I
you
had
on the bill, or are you asking?
On the bill.
Senator
On the bill.
Jacobs on the bill.
Mr. President, on the first day, since the first day I've had the privilege to serve in this chamber and serve my constituents, I said that I believed it was wrong to muddle our budget process with major policy issues. Legislation doesn't have anything to do with legislation that does not have anything to do with revenues or expenditures or state finances gets buried all too often in budget bills and passed into law with no transparency, no vetting, and no real public input. It is bad public policy, and I've introduced legislation in the past to resolve this. Unfortunately, the bills we have before us today are using that ill-advised approach once again. The language in the bill I'm referencing right now is regarding the siting of massive renewable projects, wind and solar projects, largely seen in areas outside New York City, but benefiting the region within New York City. This bill, the provision in this bill, and what it does, is it really strips local communities with the ability to have a say on whether there will be a massive wind or solar farm located in their town, in their village, in their county. Already the previous law, the existing law that we had, was woefully lacking in the ability of local community to have a say. The revisions that are put here in this bill, again, purely policy, really should not be in this piece of legislation, this budget piece of legislation, will strip largely any say of local community to have input in whether a massive windmill farm or solar farm, a windmill farm, windmills the size of height of almost 700 feet, of blades that are nearly the size of a football field, located in close to someone's backyard. That the thought that a local community would not have a say in that is very, in my mind, un-American and certainly not consistent with the legacy of New York State. I really protest this bill. I protest the way that it is going to be passed in this budget. It was my hope that we would, if anything, not have this provision in the budget, that it would be discussed at a later date. We often hear the refrain, here we are one New York, but it's very hard for constituents in my district to believe that when pieces of legislation are passed like this, which show a level of arrogance and disregard for local community say, local community input, and the democratic process. This is a major reason why I'll be voting against this piece of legislation today. Thank you, Mr. President.
Senator Savino on the bill.
Thank you, Mr. President. There's always things in budget bills that we like and we don't like. Unfortunately, it's the nature of the way we do the budget. With respect to putting policy issues in the budget, that's a fight we lost 20 years ago. Unless we're prepared to amend the Constitution, it is the way things get done here. And as frustrating as it can be, there's still a lot of good things in this budget. And I'm going to speak specifically to the issue of the definition of public works. Senator Amador and I obviously disagree on this issue, and we have a different view of history. He referenced 1918. I referenced 1934, when the public said very loudly and clearly that they believed that public dollars should not chase poverty wages, that the definition of prevailing wage was set then. It's an issue that has been watered down over the decades through judicial decisions and compromises, which is why we are here today. It is not new to this chamber. I've been in the Senate 15 years now. The definition of public works was introduced more than a decade ago. In fact, I carried it for 2 years while I was the chair of the Labor Committee. Former Senator Terry Murphy carried it the whole time he was here, and in fact, he had more co-sponsors on that bill than just about anything else. So clearly the Senate has considered strengthening the definition of public works. But I want to, again, reference history. Senator Amador talked about history. I will talk about history, not just the fact that the public decided almost 100 years ago that this made sense and it was the right thing to do for New York. We are in the midst of a pandemic. It is not the first crisis this state has faced, certainly not the first crisis in my recent lifetime, post 9/11, post Hurricane Sandy, and now. But even more importantly, if you go back to the 1930s, it was bold thinking by many people, one of whom sat in this chamber, former Senator Franklin Delano Roosevelt, who then became the President of the United States and recognized if America was going to get out of the Depression, it was going to take bold thinking and public money. Creating real jobs, investing public money. We saw the Congress do it 2 days ago, pass a $2 trillion relief package, the first of probably what will be many, to put money back into the hands of Americans so that we can get our economy going. That's what the definition of public works was the first time. That's what it will be now. It is so important that we're doing it now, making sure that we provide decent wages, good wages, and they're not the same. Upstate and down are not the same. The prevailing rate in New York City is not the prevailing rate in Buffalo. It's not the prevailing rate in Onondaga County. But people who work in those places should not be paid less with public money than the prevailing rate. That's what we're doing here today. Restating what America said in the 1930s. Public dollars should go to good-paying jobs to get Americans back on their feet. I am proud to vote for this. Thank you, Mr. President.
Senator Boyle.
Mr. President, will the sponsor yield? Will the leader yield?
Does the sponsor yield?
I'll handle the questions, Mr. President.
The sponsor yields.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. President. I'm just referring to the section regarding the definition of a political party.
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear.
I'm referring to the section that regards the definition of a political party.
The microphone is not on for Senator Bullock. I'm sorry, I'm having trouble hearing. Okay, thank you.
Is it on?
Yeah.
Under this provision, I assume that we're trying to legislate what the commission recently reported on and was subsequently thrown out by the court. Is that correct?
I believe that's correct.
Okay. So my question is this. The provision says that a political party is defined by an organization that gets a 2%, excluding blank and void ballots, at least in the preceding election for governor, received at least 2% of the total votes cast for its candidate for governor, or 130,000 votes, whichever is greater, in the year in which a governor is elected, and at least 2% of the total votes cast for its candidate for president, or 130,000 votes, whichever is greater, in the year of a presidential election. My question is, what about the parties that we have a certain number of, we call minor parties, third parties, who do not nominate candidates by their bylaws for president? Someone like the Serve America movement, the SAM party. What happens to that? Those parties, are they automatically excluded because they did not get 130,000 votes?
Correct.
On the bill, Mr. President.
Senator Boyle on the bill.
I've seen a lot of pieces of legislation that I thought was unconstitutional come to this chamber, but this is a doozy. We're actually excluding from New York State a political party who received the requisite number of votes in the last election from being a party with access to the ballot automatically every 2 years because they do not, by their bylaws, nominate a candidate for president. I hope and expect that the courts of New York State will call this unconstitutional and throw this provision out. I vote in the negative.
Senator Lanza.
Mr. President, on the bill.
Senator Lanza on the bill.
Mr. President, first, let me say, as we go through these difficult times with this pandemic, as our constituents, as families across New York have their lives and see their lives turned upside down, I want to say it's always good to see you, Senator Benjamin, or as we like to say, Mr. President, and all my colleagues here as we work together on behalf of the people. Yes, you too, Senator Savino, on behalf of the people of the state of New York. And we will get through this, and we've got to make sure that we do, and we will. Mr. President, knowing what's happening, seeing how people from one end of this state are going through living hell, who are worried about the safety and the well-being of their families. And it's that time of year when we meet every year to discuss the budget, how we're going to spend the billions of dollars we collect from taxpayers in New York. And this year, of course, is unique. It's different, sadly so. But one would think, with everything going on out there, that the focus would be only on necessary spending to keep the wheels of this state moving forward. One would hope that the only focus we have here is the pandemic. What we're going to do in this budget that ensures that when we come out of this, we're going to be able to reboot. We're going to be able to restore sanity and safety and prosperity to this state. After looking at this budget, one would be wrong. You know, it seems as though some people think that this pandemic ought to be used as some kind of cloak of invisibility to shove through all kinds of policies that have nothing to do with the true business of the day, which is to really save our state, save our people. And there are a number of policies that I can talk about that prove that. You know, only in Albany would we be asked to consider a bill that we received only an hour ago that is entitled Transportation and Economic Development. And as you read through the pages of this bill, what you learn is that catastrophically, it is devoid of any policies and any spending that will give any assistance to transportation in the state of New York, that will do anything to aid economic development. In fact, quite the opposite. There are policies shoved in this budget that I think spell doom for small businesses across this state. That when this epidemic finally passes, businesses in this state are going to find that it's even a more difficult place to do business. Families are going to find out that it's even more expensive to live in New York. And that's the last thing we ought to be doing any year, but certainly this year. So there's one policy that I want to talk about that I think really accentuates the hubris, the arrogance, and the wrongness of this bill before us today. And that's so-called campaign finance reform or public financing of campaigns. Imagine people are getting sick, people are dying, people are losing their jobs, businesses are folding. That's what's happening right now, right this very moment in the state of New York. But that ought not be a reason for politicians to figure out a way to give themselves a little welfare, a little extra money in their campaign coffers. Pandemic be damned. Maybe people aren't looking, so we're going to make this grab, this money grab. Well, maybe some people think that the pandemic offers a little cloudiness, some fog, some smoke, a cloak of invisibility. But when we come out of this, as we will, the people are going to see what happened here today. And what did happen here today? People are going to be forced to have their tax dollars be given to campaign candidates, to support their campaigns. Listen to this. There's someone running for office in your district, you don't want to support them. Believe it or not, Mr. President, there are a few people that don't support me. Hard to believe, but true. They're going to be forced to buy my lawn signs, to buy my mail, to buy my campaign buttons, to give my candidacy support. Now, I know the other side is going to say, well, it's voluntary. It's voluntary. It's a checkoff box on your tax return. That is the biggest fraud I've ever heard. We all know the people of New York are smarter than that. I know they're smarter than that. The New Yorkers I know, when it's time to pay their taxes, are not going to say, I've got an idea. Yes. Yes, sir.
Thank you, Senator Lanza. Mr. President, is it true that...
Point of order.
Senator Griffo?
He's on the bill, though. Okay.
Senator Janaris?
Thank you, Senator Lanza. Mr. President, I would like to ask Senator Lanza if there was a time when he served in the New York City Council.
Yes, Mr. President, yeah.
Would the sponsor continue to yield?
Does the sponsor
would the
yield?
senator continue to yield?
I'm sorry, Senator. The senator yields, yes.
During that time, how much in public funding under the New York City Matching Fund program did then City Councilman Lanza receive?
Mr. President, I don't recollect the exact dollar amounts, but I'll answer it this way. Yes, I participated in that program. It is that experience which has taught me that this is the worst program that we could shove down the throats of the people of New York. In fact, it is that program and this program that I promise you will facilitate corruption beyond your wildest beliefs, and that's what we've seen in New York City, where people run not to win, not to serve, but so that they could set up a cottage industry of paying taxpayer dollars to their friends. But I will say this, the reason why you, in New York City, if you ran for the city council, you participated, is because unless you were a billionaire, you were forced to do so. And how is it that you were forced to do so? I didn't like it then, but if you didn't do it, you know what happened? You were punished. Your opponent, whoever that person might be, would get 4 times and 5 times and 6 times what you got. So the way that program is written, if you do not participate, you are punished.
Senator Lanza for his
Yeah.
indulgence.
Senator Lanza on the bill.
Yeah. Thank you, Senator Janaris, for reminding me how horrific and how ridiculous and so how onerous this program is. I will not yield until I finish. Yeah.
No, Senator Lanza on the bill. You're on the bill.
I'm sorry, yeah. So, let me rephrase. People are worried about whether or not their families are going to survive this pandemic. People are sick. We have a hospital emergency. We have a public safety emergency, a public health emergency. We have an economic emergency. People are losing jobs. Businesses are folding. Somebody has the good idea, while all this is happening, to shove this piece of nonsense legislation policy into this budget. It's wrong. Yeah, voluntary, so-called, check a box. If you don't check a box, because I know New Yorkers are smart. New Yorkers are not going to say, in the middle of everything else that's going on in my life, I've got a good idea come tax-paying time. I'm going to take a little money out of my pocket, and I'm going to give it to the local politician. It's ridiculous. It's absurd. It's insulting, and it's not going to happen, so what's going to happen? If you look at this legislation, it says, we will then take it from the general fund. We will then take it from this other fund, which means we will take it from the taxpayer. We will take it at the expense of education and health care and all the other good things that we do here in New York State, and transportation and economic development, which we do not do in this bill. That's hubris, that's arrogance, and that's wrong. The taxpayers should not be forced to pay for political campaigns. Mr. President, I'll be voting no.
Senator Krueger on the bill.
Thank you, Mr. President. I want to thank my colleagues for answering the questions on the sections of the bill that they are far more expert on than myself. But I do feel a need to highlight what is perhaps a little confusion for people who might not be here or might not have downloaded the bill. Yes, the bill has many sections that deal with transportation, the environment, economic development. Yes, the state of New York is continuing many programs that we've had in place that if we didn't continue through this budget bill would cease to exist, which would require a great deal of explaining by all of us at home. And yes, this bill goes further in a number of areas than we have had to go before. For example, in transportation and investment in mass transit. We all know that we are in a crisis now, and we need a bigger, stronger state to come out of it when we're done, which means we can't forget that our core responsibilities are making sure we have a 21st century mass transit system when people can come out of their homes and do have jobs to go back to. We can't forget that, and there are significant investments in transportation funding in this bill, including the ability to draw down federal funds that they're making available to us. And while I may or may not agree with one of my colleagues about the new changes in the rules for siting energy plants, and I believe that we have tried to build in protections for local communities, please no one forget that because the pandemic is taking up all of our time and energy now, along with an economic collapse far beyond our comprehension throughout the world, come the day we all get to take off our masks and leave our homes and breathe freely and move forward with the agenda we hoped we would have 3 months ago, we will still be facing an Earth that must respond to climate change crises. And that means making sure we have the renewable energy so that we do not have to fall back on dependence on the dangerous, harmful fossil fuels. So that means we have to make sure we move forward with the right laws for the 21st century for siting utilities. We just have to. We can't lay it aside because we're dealing with another crisis, because unfortunately, some crises just keep rolling along, even though we have to take care of other things right now. And I will say for the record, I don't like this campaign finance bill either. I wish it wasn't in there. I believe in public financing of campaigns, but I certainly don't like the idea that we yet again are trying to take away third parties' rights to be able to run people and participate in our democracy. So like lots of other people, you don't like everything that's in a bill and you hold your nose on the stuff you don't like because you know you need the stuff that you need that's in there. And again, I thought Senator Savino handled it so well on prevailing wage. This is if you are taking government money. This is not if you're a private entity who decides to build things without drawing down some model of subsidy, tax exemption, credits, or actual contracts with the government. You don't have to participate in this. But if you're choosing to use government money, you do. And so I just feel like some people listening might have walked away not understanding this is not a new mandate on anyone who ever decides to build anything or hire a worker. This is about people who choose from an economic decision to use government subsidy in some way. So I thank her for her explanation. I just feel that it was important to highlight after the back and forth that that was the underlying discussion that might have gotten lost. So there are plenty of things in this bill people can be unhappy with. I have plenty of things I wish got into this bill and stayed in this bill, and they fell out because of financial crisis and pandemic. But again, our job is to make sure not only is the state continuing to run now on the deadline, but make sure that the state is in a position to be able to come out of this pandemic and this economic collapse and be more ready than ever to compete in a different world. And this pandemic will have caused us to be in a different world also. So we need to be ready to move forward in ways that we didn't even understand a few months ago, Mr. President. So I can be unhappy, and I can still vote yes, and I will be voting yes, and I urge my colleagues to vote yes, Mr. President. Thank you.
Are there any other senators wishing to be heard? Seeing and hearing none, debate is closed. The secretary will ring the bell. Read the last section.
Section 3, this action take effect immediately.
Call the roll.
Addabbo, Fennington, Janoris, Kruger, Stewart, Cousins, Thomas.
Announce the results.
In relation to calendar 635, those senators voted in the negative are Senators Akshar, Amador, Borrello, Boyle, Flanagan, Funky, Gallivan, Griffo, Helming, Jacobs, Jordan, Lanza, Laval, Little, O'Mara, Ort, Ranzenhofer, Ritchie, Robach, Salazar, Sereno, and Tedisco. Ayes 39, nays 22.
The bill is passed. Senator Janoris, that completes the reading of the controversial calendar.
Mr. President, the work continues. We are awaiting the remaining budget bills, after which point we will allow the minority ample time to review and discuss it, and we'll come back to try and finish our work at some point later today. With that, the Senate stands at ease.
The Senate stands at ease. The Senate will return to order. Senator Janoris.
Mr. President, pursuant to Rule 5, Section 2, I move that we stay in session beyond midnight.
Without objection, so ordered.
Senate will stand at ease.
The Senate will stand at ease. The Senate will return to order. Senator Janoris.
Mr. President, is there any further business at the desk?
There's no further business at the desk.
Move to adjourn until about 6 hours and 25 minutes from now at 9 a.m., please.
We move to adjourn till 9 a.m. The Senate stands adjourned until 9 a.m.